Magic does not fool you because you are stupid. Magic fools you because it is stupid. If we want to fool you really badly, we make sure the method is so stupid, the smarter you are, the less you want to think about it. So I'm going to do magic for you that'll be stupid to everybody watching.
In June of 2006, during the airing of Season 2, Episode 4 of Mind Freak, famous magician Criss Angel performed an illusion in which he walked across the surface of a swimming pool, in what seemed to be clear defiance of the laws of physics. And as a kid, I was blown away by this. My mind was racing with a single question: how did he do it? After all, there's no such thing as magic. Was he suspended by wires? Was he walking on a sheet of glass? And if he was, how was he able to take his shoes off and have them sink to the bottom right in front of him? During the 13th episode of the 2008-2009 series revival of Breaking the Magician's Code, Magic's Biggest Secrets Finally Revealed, the masked magician would replicate this illusion, exposing that it was performed with the use of a plexiglass walkway made up of individual segments and carefully selected camera angles designed to obscure them. The segments providing gaps for the magician to drop things through, such as shoes, and allowing the paid spectators to swim through in front of the magician, convincing us that he really is walking on water. From simple card tricks to sawing a woman in half, we're able to explain how magic tricks work because we understand that they are just that, a trick, an illusion. There is some sort of deception occurring to convince us that the impossible is happening right before our very eyes. And this is an understanding that many people, generally speaking, don't correlate with mediums, psychics, clairvoyants, tarot card readings, horoscopes, and things of that nature, believing them to be real. With the psychic services industry generating over $2 billion annually, and these types of services only increasing in popularity, even though the claims of mediums and psychics are dubious at best, falling apart when placed under the slightest bit of scrutiny, with many clear examples of mediums and psychics getting it wrong.
Is his name Bernard or Barnard?
No,
Why would he say that?
that's our nan.
Oh, your nan. Sorry.
In the coming elections, and we see Hillary predominating in the elections. We think Hillary Clinton will be elected president.
They were wrong.
Was somebody murdered? Like, murdered?
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
This little girl is me. And you told somebody that she's dead.
Wait a minute. You didn't disappear?
I'm right here.
I am shocked and appalled.
But why do they get things wrong? Well, in order to understand that, we need to understand why they appear to get things right, starting with the most basic of these practices, horoscopes and tarot card readings. This is how psychics and mediums fool us, a breakdown of the deceptive tricks they are known to use, some of the more fraudulent practices psychics and mediums have been involved with over the years, and what happens when they take things too far. Horoscopes are something we've likely all come across, as they're just about everywhere, whether it be newspapers, websites, social media, trashy gossip mags, and even children's media, astrology with Squidward being a very real thing, and boy was it a thing.
Not all Cancerians are crabby, but they are all good at causing problems and then blaming them on others. Many famous fibbers and elected officials are Cancers.
Horoscopes are based on the idea that the positioning of celestial bodies at the time we are born and where they are now influence our personalities and behavior, providing us with predictions as to how events in our life might go. Please allow me to now read a few of your daily horoscopes. Leo, one or more of your co-workers could appear to be rather upset or depressed on the job today, and this is likely to affect your own efficiency. Gemini, don't look to others for support because they'll have their own agendas and ideas about what you should do. Only you know what is best. Taurus, things are flowing your way today and you should find a great deal of pleasure in the comfort of others. Aries, open yourself up to the world and show the people around you that you have a great deal more to offer than you've been revealing. Virgo, a close relative may be ill or otherwise troubled and you might worry a bit too much today because of a lack of communication from this person. Cancer, your generosity is at an all-time high and will take many forms, which will be appreciated by that special someone in your life. For those of you with these star signs, you may feel that what I just said relates to you and was an accurate representation of how you are feeling or the situation you are currently in. However, that's not possible unless you're a Taurus, as all of those were excerpts from daily horoscopes for Taurus taken from random days over the last several months. And even then, according to the idea of horoscopes, anyone who is a Taurus watching this now should not have found theirs to be relatable, as while I am no astrophysicist, I am quite certain the planets are not currently where they were in December of 2023. If we take a look at a few more examples without their associated star signs, we can see that they are vague, generalized statements that could apply to just about anyone. At times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you are introverted, wary, reserved. Yeah, sometimes I want to go to the pub and hang out with my mates, other times I just want to sit in my room and watch Kitchen Nightmares. While these statements may feel incredibly relatable and we can apply them to ourselves, they most certainly aren't talking about me or you specifically, as these statements in particular were written in 1948 and were used by psychologist Bertram Forer to demonstrate what would come to be known as the Barnum effect. In his experiment, Forer provided 39 of his students with what they believed were individual personality evaluations, however in reality were the exact same 13 statements for each of them, which Forer had taken largely from a newsstand astrology book. Unaware that they had received the same evaluations as each other, when asked to rate from 0 being poor to 5 being perfect on how effective the evaluation was in revealing personality, as well as the degree to which the description revealed basic characteristics of their personality, each of the students rated the evaluation as highly accurate. Unsurprisingly, the students who had also been asked to check each statement as either true or false about themselves marked the majority as true. Statements number 2 and 7 receiving an almost perfect score, with 38 out of the 39 students believing they were true about them, neither being rejected as false, simply uncertain. Those statements being, you have a tendency to be critical of yourself, and at times you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing, showing that being critical of yourself and self-doubt as a whole are almost universal human feelings. However, much like omphalophobia being the fear of belly buttons, a useless fact you are now aware of, the information seemingly provided to you by Barnum statements is ultimately worthless. As a form of cognitive bias, the Barnum effect simply shows our brain's tendency to accept as true or apply personal meaning to vague, generic statements that could be about anyone as if they were specifically made about us. And it's what horoscopes, among other things, rely on to seem accurate or real, being the same psychological effect that fortune cookies rely on. And people won't use those to make big life decisions, but they will with horoscopes and they will with tarot card readings. Dating back to 15th century Italy, we find the first written records of what we would consider to be tarot cards, the first reference being a journal entry dated the 16th of September 1440, with the oldest surviving examples of these early tarot cards being the Visconti Sforza collection, a set of approximately 15 incomplete decks which were painted sometime between 1450 and 1480. While tarot cards are widely used in divination practices today, they were originally known as trionfi or carte da trionfi, meaning triumph or cards of triumph, and were used for playing games. The term tarocchi, meaning tarot cards, not showing up until the 1500s. It's not until 18th century France that we find the first references to their use in fortune telling in works like Volume 8 of Antoine Coeur de Geblin's Primitive World, published 1781, in which Antoine Coeur de Geblin, proving that conspiracy theorists making up wild claims has always been a thing, makes baseless assertions that the history of tarot cards actually dates back to ancient Egypt, going as far as to say the name of this game is pure Egyptian. It is composed of the word tar, which means way, path, and of the word ro, ros, rog, which means king, royal. It is word for word the royal path of life, a belief that has persisted to this very day and one that is completely unfounded. In Coeur de Geblin's time, Egyptian hieroglyphs had not yet been deciphered. It would take the finding of the Rosetta Stone on the 15th of July 1799 and decades of research before Jean-Francois Champollion on the 27th of September 1822 would announce publicly that he had successfully deciphered them and they could now be understood. This discovery thoroughly debunking the claims of Antoine Coeur de Geblin and others like him, such as the Count of Malay, whose essay in which he desperately tries to explain how tarot is actually the ancient Egyptian book of Thoth had been included in Volume 8 of the Primitive World, a theory that is pure weapons-grade balonium, the claims of Coeur de Geblin and the Count of Malay being based on nothing more than sheer speculation, lacking any actual evidence to back up their ideas that have never been proven to be true or are demonstrably false. Now that we know the origins of tarot cards are no more mystical than that of a deck of Uno cards, Ah yes, the draw 4. I sense a friendship is about to be tested. Aside from the Barnum effect doing a fair amount of heavy lifting, tarot card readers rely on good intuition, suggestion, and our own confirmation bias. While intuition and suggestion are relatively easy concepts to grasp, confirmation bias isn't a topic I feel comes up in everyday conversation. Simply put, it's our brain's tendency to seek out, notice, focus on, and give greater credence to information and evidence that fits with our pre-existing beliefs, much like the Barnum effect occurring at a subconscious level, meaning we are unaware that we even do it. Having watched a lot of tarot card readings in researching this video, when you know what to look for, it all becomes very obvious.
Alright, so what I see here is that some of you have really been struggling with your finances.
What I see here is a big old Barnum statement. People worrying about their finances has been a thing since money was invented. Proving a point, this tarot card reading is over 2 years old, yet I'm sure a lot of us can relate to it.
Now, the world is going to become your oyster. I feel that you're going to be quite significantly wealthy in this lifetime, and as the days and months go by, your wealth is only going to increase and get much better.
Telling people that they're going to be significantly wealthy and that as time goes by their wealth is only going to increase, of course playing to our confirmation bias. I don't think everyone necessarily wants to be rich, but I do think everyone wants to believe that they're going to be well off enough to not have to worry about the damn electric bill. In researching, I stumbled across one video that was so bafflingly ridiculous to me I can't not share it with you. Fair warning, you may be in danger of copying secondhand brain damage with this one, but I give you Miss Cleo of the Psychic Readers Network.
Don't you really want to know?
Okay, I was wondering who the father of my baby was.
All right, let's take a look. The Miss Cleo DNA test. I'm solely searching for the father of your baby. Oh, it's the one that's very unpleasant, okay?
Okay.
And he's also the one that had another girlfriend while he was sleeping with you.
Yes, he did.
Yep, that's him. That's the daddy.
Okay.
But you knew that.
I wasn't sure.
Just two things. One, there is no way in the world, no way on earth that holds up in court. And two, if you're using a tarot card reader to tell you the identity of the father of your child, you have issues this video will not solve. I really hope that was a paid actor and they were just doing a bit. Given the history of the Psychic Readers Network, that is a possibility. Launched by Stephen Feder and Peter Stoltz in 1993 as the Psychic Advisors Network, which was quickly rebranded to the Psychic Readers Network, it saw moderate success receiving celebrity endorsements from people like Billy D. Williams, aka Lando Calrissian. I guess those deals with Darth Vader really didn't pan out. Miss Cleo, born Yuri Del Harris, would later become the official spokesperson. Her charismatic personality and iconic catchphrase boosting traffic to the Psychic Hotline in a big way, making the Psychic Readers Network a massive success. In 2002, Access Resource Services Inc., which was doing business as Aura Communications, Circle of Light, Mind and Spirit, and the Psychic Readers Network were dealt a crushing blow. When the Federal Trade Commission filed a complaint against them, alleging, among other things, that they had misrepresented to customers that they would receive psychic readings at no charge, did not incur costs when they remain on the phone with the psychic readers, and were obligated to pay charges for calls made to the network's audio text numbers that consumers were not obligated to pay. The allegations also claiming that customers who called the advertised toll-free 1-800 number would be provided with a pay-per-minute 900 number to receive their psychic reading, the first few minutes of their quote-unquote free reading being wasted gathering their information. While this certainly wasn't the first lawsuit they had faced, it was the biggest. In settling with the FTC, Access Resource Services Inc. and the Psychic Readers Network were ordered to forgive approximately $500 million in outstanding debt, pay a $5 million fine, to cease all pay-per-call activity, and to return any uncashed checks to customers, in which they were to include a letter stating that the defendants are returning checks as a part of a settlement with the FTC, and the defendants are rescinding all related contracts, agreements, and understandings with consumers. The history of the Psychic Readers Network is of course more detailed than the things I've mentioned. One of their biggest claims was that in calling you could speak directly to Miss Cleo. However, more often than not, this was not true. In a 2014 Vice article, Miss Cleo recounts a time where she met a gentleman in a Best Buy who asked her, "Aren't you supposed to be on the phone?" To which Miss Cleo states, "I said, honey, do you really think I do that while I'm traveling and doing press? You have a better chance of talking to me right here than you do if you called." Psychic hotlines have often faced criticism for shady practices, typically being called out by former employees.
When I did it, they just gave me a phone number to call, and I was a psychic. There's no supervision, there's no training. Bruce McCoy told The Future by phone for 3 years, but admits to not being clairvoyant at all.
They don't care. They just want you to stay on the phone with people. They don't care what you're saying to them. You don't know that this person's a real psychic. This person's probably an out-of-work actor or a telemarketer or someone who has no psychic training and is simply just being paid to talk to you.
Fraud is rampant in the psychic community, one of the more common methods of conning people being that of curse removal, and that's something we'll circle back to. But now that we understand some of the psychology, that being we are likely to apply broad statements to ourselves, and if someone tells us something we want to hear, we are likely to believe what they say, it's time to see how this can be exploited. It's time to take a look inside the magician's toolbox. Magicians have a long history of exposing psychic fraud, from Harry Houdini investigating and debunking mediums, seances and spirit photography throughout the early 1920s, going as far as to testify in support of an anti-spiritualist bill shortly before his passing in 1926, to James Randi, who aside from looking like he should be guiding hobbits on their way to Mount Doom, made investigating and exposing claims of the paranormal his entire personality, coming to be known in certain circles as the psychic hitman. Even the aforementioned Criss Angel got into an altercation with the man named Jim Callahan on the 2007 show Phenomenon, a competition to find the next great mentalist. Callahan claimed to channel the spirit of late author Raymond Hill in order to find out what object had been placed inside a box earlier in the evening, to which Angel produced an envelope and challenged Callahan to provide specific details about its contents. If he could, he would pay him $1 million of his own money. Of course, Callahan could not and quickly became enraged, the confrontation almost becoming physical, with Angel all but accusing Callahan of passing off mentalist techniques as something supernatural. It's worth mentioning, one of them came away from the incident much more salty about it than the other.
I've been hired by the producers of the show to give my honest assessment based on my knowledge in the arts. And when I see somebody using trickery, you know, things that I did when I was 14 years old, and then trying to pass it off as, you know, some psychic ability, or he's a medium, or he's talking to the dead, you know, it's a bunch of bull. And I'm not going to stand for that.
Mr. Angel, I believe, is an ideological bigot. He claims there's no supernatural, there's no paranormal. I see him walking on water, and it's his way of disproving that Jesus Christ was real. I think every Christian in the United States should be outraged with him. He should judge me on my competition. He's not there to challenge me. So he got the challenge. He has to put a bunch of people between me and him to feel safe. You know, he was practicing that. He had notes jammed up underneath his backside because he needs 5 guys to write for him. I dare the guy to debate me live on television. I don't think he can put more than 3 words together in a sentence and hold a reasonable debate. That's my opinion.
A stunning display of ad hominem. Skilled mentalists rely on a variety of techniques for their performances, however, one of the more notable ones is that of shotgunning. As the name suggests, shotgunning is when a person makes a cluster of broad statements that could apply to anyone, which are often fired out in rapid succession, attempting to elicit a hit from the audience, taking advantage of not only the Barnum effect and confirmation bias, but statistics in order to make sure a hit is more likely. Taking advantage of statistics without people realizing is fairly easy to do. Earlier in this video, I read people's horoscopes, and while the star signs I selected may have seemed random, by including Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, I covered from July through to late September. This detail being insignificant until we take into account birth rates. In places like the UK, Canada, and America, really just the entire Northern Hemisphere, it is more common for people to be born in this time frame. So by including those star signs, I made it statistically more likely that people watching from these areas would have their horoscope read. Shotgunning is observable in the readings of mediums and psychics, from seemingly being able to guess the name of a deceased relative to any potential medical conditions they may have suffered from before their passing.
I have a mother figure very strong coming around you, okay? And with the name of either Mary, Margaret, do you understand the name? Margaret Mary, okay, Margaret Mary.
I know that the month of May is connected, or the 5th of a month is important in some way in the family, and they tell me to talk about Tommy. So there's got to be a T name either living or connected to this. If this makes sense over here, you can raise your hand.
Who died with the brain, the issue with the brain? And who is the MR name? Mark, Mary, Marie. They don't have to be past. They could be here in the physical world.
Names beginning with M are fairly common. According to Behind the Name, as of 2023, it is the third most common initial for babies born in America. If we take it back to 1960, we can see that M is still fairly common. While the popularity of names can fluctuate and change over time, initials are somewhat different. There are those that remain consistently fairly common. Names beginning with an A, M, J, C, K are all fairly common, and we know psychics and mediums take advantage of this because of examples like this.
Right by that column, right in front of that column, I've got somebody's dad who's showing up. He's telling me he's the father figure. He's telling me to acknowledge Charles. There's got to be a C or a K name, but I feel like it's either Charles or Charlie or there's something like that that he wants me to say. So it's either who he is, who he's with, or somebody who's still here.
There's got to be a C or a K name. Now, I've never seen Charles spelt with a K. However, earlier in this reading, John Edwards said, names do come through. I could be off by the name. I will not be off by the initial or what the name sounds like. Certain things kind of sound the same. It's fairly easy to get a hit when you're actually providing two initials rather than one in the form of a C or K name. It could be Charles, it could be Chad, it could be Kevin. But this is why you don't really see psychics and mediums throwing out letters like Q. How many Quintons do you reckon there are in the world? As I mentioned, this is also how psychics and mediums seemingly know how a person passed away or any medical conditions they may have had.
Okay, so I'm gonna start. I want to start with the father figure that departed from the chest because he's laboring my breathing.
Heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. However, in Teresa Caputo saying a father figure who departed from the chest, she has covered everything from pneumonia, heart attack, lung cancer, to having your heart ripped out and sacrificed to Kali like that one guy in Temple of Doom. Let's pretend we're doing a psychic reading in front of an audience for a moment. If we were to use this technique, we could say, I'm getting a female presence, it's an older woman, and I'm hearing a sound, it's a k sound. I believe this person's name starts with either a C or a K, it could be Claire, and they're telling me it was a recent passing. With our shotgun statement, we've highlighted three things. Grandmother, name begins with either a C or a K, passed away recently. We've stayed statistically safe, and in a room full of people who've come to see a medium hoping to make contact with a past loved one, we are very likely to get a hit. We'll return to this example later, but there are really only two ways this technique fails, and that is if you start off way too specific, or if you go so broad that the trick becomes noticeable.
I'm starting with a gentleman, first off, and with this man, who? Reg? And he's also mentioned Frank. Thank you.
Here, Derek Akira has gone way too specific from the start by claiming he's in communication with a spirit who mentioned two people by the names of Reg and Frank. He's really put himself in a box, making it unlikely that he will get a hit. He does eventually get a hit with the statement, was in the Air Force but not a pilot. No mention of Reg or Frank. In fact, that man's father's name was Hugh.
Do you know the names of people deceased and living, grandparents, parents? Okay, I see an M or J person. Do you have somebody, family, that is a J or an M?
Here, Shah Margolis has gone way too broad. With an M or a J, she could be in contact with the spirit of notable campaigner for India's independence from British rule Mahatma Gandhi, or explorer and first governor of Puerto Rico, Juan Ponce de Leon. As it turns out, it was this woman's 6-year-old daughter, Mary, who is alive. Why she would need to reach out and make contact with her mother through a spiritual medium, I cannot say. I feel like sending a text would be easier. But in making the trick noticeable, she does get called out for it.
How do you explain you failing miserably here to predict
Well,
the
that's
ground?
wait a second.
fault.
But
It's part of my fault,
but I
Mary.
picked up on Mary. I said it's her
Yeah,
daughter.
yeah.
So
Well, you didn't say Mary, you said an M or a J. I mean,
Yeah,
I got an M and a J in my family. You got an M and a J in your family?
Mary the most common girl name?
Shotgunning is typically how psychics and mediums select audience members for a reading, but it is also used at the start of individual readings. From there, psychics and mediums essentially have two options, those being hot reading and cold reading. Hot reading is when a mentalist, psychic, or medium performs a reading for a person using information about them that they have gathered prior to the reading without their knowledge. This can be done in many different ways, from something as simple as planting a person in the audience who's in on it, to more complicated methods such as infamous televangelist Peter Popov using information that had been written down on prayer cards by members of his congregation prior to the start of his service. This information then being transmitted to him through the use of a wireless earpiece, making it seem like God was telling him things. With the the rise of social media, gathering information about a person can be fairly easy. In booking a reading with a psychic and providing them with your name, they are potentially one Google search away from a Facebook page or Instagram account in which some people document their entire lives. Now, I'm not saying all psychics and mediums do this, but hot reading is a technique that several big names have been accused of allegedly using. Many skeptics speculate it's something Hollywood medium Tyler Henry uses in his readings as he's talking to celebrities whose entire lives, tragedies and all, are publicly available. And depending on how you interpret the following clip, hot reading is a technique that John Edward may have used on at least one occasion.
Hold on. You tell me to acknowledge Anthony? Are you waving like that's me? That's you? Really?
For, of all people, Dateline cameraman Tony Pagano, one of two cameramen shooting our story. John Edwards zeroes in on the fact that Tony's father has died.
Did you not see Dad before he passed? Had you either been away or had been distant?
Yeah, I was away.
Okay, because he's making me feel like we need to move past this.
You met Tony before, though, right?
Earlier that day? Yeah.
They not only had met, but Tony told John Edward a critical piece of information during the shoot.
You'd spoken to him. But were you aware that his dad had died before you did this reading?
I think earlier in the day he had said something.
It makes me feel like, that's fairly significant. I mean, you knew that he had a dead relative, and you knew it was the dad.
Okay.
While that clip was about as blurry as the average photo of Bigfoot, I think it paints a fairly clear picture. However, we can't say with 100% certainty that John Edward was hot reading, as we would have to know exactly what the two men spoke about. I personally believe he was, but if you disagree, you have to admit it is at the very least incredibly suspicious. Some other people who've been accused of hot reading include British psychic Joe Power and James Van Prague. Exposing mediums and psychics for hot reading can be difficult, as you never know when or if a psychic will hot read, and you need to know exactly how they acquired the information. The best way to do this is with false information. On the 2007 BBC Three show The Bullshit Detective, 3 mediums were brought to an old chocolate factory and attempted to communicate with any spirits that may be present. All 3 were able to make contact with the spirit of a man named George Bull.
She's given me the name of George.
And I got the name George.
George. It was George, yeah.
One medium even going into a trance and channeling his spirit, recounting his violent passing. This all seems very impressive until we take into account that George Bull was a made-up person.
The only trouble is that George is part of a made-up story that I planted on the Chocolate Factory website a week ago.
I feel like he was quite angry about something as well.
I think they might be cheating, and I'm curious to see if they'll repeat any more of my fake history.
They'd obviously looked at the website and been caught out, except for one who was standing in front of a fake portrait of George Bull, complete with a nameplate when he came up with the surname Bull.
Do you know the initials of his second name? Would it be?
Yeah.
Would it Bull?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Also, I just have to say, channeling the spirit of someone who does not or never did exist has got to be pretty embarrassing. You would think being exposed for hot reading would be a career ender, however more often than not it isn't. In 2017, medium Thomas John was allegedly caught hot reading by skeptics Susan Gerbic and Mark Edward, whose team had created Facebook pages filled with false information. During their reading at one of Thomas John's shows, he seemingly drew upon this false information.
Who's Andy?
That's my brother.
That's your brother. I feel like you and Andy, I feel like you always kind of share this energy between you where you could kind of like hear each other's thoughts and things like that. Somebody's making me aware of cancer. Is this your brother? Did he have cancer? And I get in here, which to me would show me stomach or pancreas. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. I also, he's bringing this up and he brought it up 3 times and he's like, Maria. Do you know who that is? Because he's bringing up Maria. And Buddy? Who's that?
Again, as with the clip of John Edward, I believe he was hot reading. If you disagree, you have to admit it is extremely suspicious. More so in this case, as he was talking about fictional people and events. Thomas John would of course defend himself from this allegation, however it really didn't matter. In 2018, he would star in the show Seatbelt Psychic, and in 2020, The Thomas John Experience, being promoted to millions as having genuine psychic abilities, furthering his career. Realistically, you are never going to catch every psychic hot reading. Cold reading, on the other hand, is something you can see them do. Cold reading is made up of several different mentalist tricks and is used by mediums and psychics to trick people into providing information about themselves without them realizing. This information then being used to construct a narrative or make it appear like the psychic or medium is in contact with the spirit of a past loved one. We've already talked about shotgunning, which is a part of cold reading, and a technique that usually follows shotgunning is fishing. Fishing too relies on asking questions, however it involves a few subtleties, with each question asked the focus tightening based on observations like a person's age, body language, and responses given.
Is his name followed on after you?
Yes.
All right, because it's showing me there's a following on with the name.
Okay.
So, you have a brother, don't you?
I'm adopted, and my birth mother had a son that she kept. So, yes, I do.
Okay. Your mom is making me feel like either find your brother or acknowledge your brother, or you're looking for your brother, so therefore that's why she wants me to talk about the brother.
And when she died, she was holding my hand and she said, the light, it's so bright. And I says, Mom, it's okay to go.
And is your dad also departed as well?
Yes, he is.
So know that they are together.
Now, I don't want to be that guy, but some of the comments on the original clip were pointing it out, and it would be remiss of me not to. Teresa Caputo really just looked at a woman who is clearly of a, shall we say, advanced age and asked her if her father has passed away after she just told her about her mother passing away. Let's return to our shotgunning example from earlier and start fishing. In response to our shotgun statement, a person in the audience who appears to be in their mid-20s raises their hand. Based on their apparent age and what we said, we can ask them, do you have a grandmother who passed away? They respond, yes, my grandmother Clarice passed away 8 months ago. We can then say, she keeps showing me a rolling pin and I feel like it's fairly significant. Does this make sense to you? Like your grandmother, she didn't happen to enjoy baking, did she? Or she was better at baking than you are? Here we're actually taking advantage of two things. The idea of a grandmother baking treats for a grandchild is basically cliche, so we're statistically safe, and we've incorporated another mentalist trick known as the vanishing negative. By saying she didn't happen to enjoy baking, did she? No matter what the response is, we can act like we were right. If they respond yes, she made the best brownies, we can continue down this line with talks of a secret brownie recipe and how she never measured things out and was amazing at baking. However, if the response happens to be no, we can say, I didn't think so. She didn't like being in the kitchen very much, did she? Because that's what she's telling me now. Good psychics will always have a way of turning their misses into hits, but in this example, we haven't told this person anything they didn't already know. In fact, they told us everything we needed to know in order to fabricate a narrative or make it seem like we are in contact with the spirit of their grandmother.
I mean, she's making something with dough, you know, rolling out dough, and so
she was a very nice cooker.
Oh, so she cooked.
Yeah, a lot.
Did she roll out? I don't know if it's what she's making with rolling it out.
Maybe some amazing pastry because she was
Okay, she did pastries.
Yes, all the time I was going to her place, I was getting.
And she keeps showing me like baking. I don't know whether she used to bake a lot of pastries or something because she keeps putting a crust on a pie actually. No, I don't think you are actually because she's saying no, you don't cook. So do you not like cooking?
Oh, slightly. It's not my favourite thing to do.
It's not your favourite thing, is it? No. Right, because she's just showing me no.
We know that psychics use fishing to gain information because whenever they say something, they will immediately seek validation by asking things like, does this make sense to you or do you understand that? Turning everything they say into a question, whether it was framed as one or not.
At the time that she died, she's just making me feel numb, like I can't feel anything. At the time that she died, sometimes it's because something's in their system and they can't feel anything, but she's showing feeling numb. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so she wants you to know she didn't feel any pain, okay?
Either he's trying to tell me that you are the baby of the family, or you are the baby, but he's acknowledging the word baby. Do you understand this?
I'm pregnant.
Oh, congratulations, because he's acknowledging baby.
When fishing is done well, it's fairly impressive and generally speaking goes unnoticed. However, when it's done poorly, it becomes incredibly obvious.
Is there a separation in the family now? Maybe mum and dad have parted ways?
No, mum and dad have both passed.
Your mum and dad have both passed. Okay, she showed me that there was a separation in the family with a mother and a father, so that would then be them coming through. Right, okay, thank you. Your father's cross, correct?
Yes.
All right, you are very similar to him. You look a lot like him. Would you understand that?
No.
Or do you look like your mum? Right, okay, you look a lot like one of the members of the parents, but because she just keeps coming through with the face, and it's a mirror.
What the hell is that?
Honestly, I almost feel bad for Lisa Williams here, but I think the look on this man's face is very telling as to how he feels about the whole experience. While there are other tricks that are a part of cold reading, such as the rainbow ruse, which is really just the practical application of Barnum statements, and fine flattery being subtle compliments a psychic or medium may give to make you like them more, because if you like them, you're more likely to believe them, along with video editing working in the favor of TV mediums and TikTok psychics as they're able to take out their misses and only show their hits, the audience misremembering details or stretching to make details fit with what a psychic is saying also plays its part in cold reading.
Is there a brother? Does your husband who died have a brother who's here?
I have a brother who's here.
You have a brother who's here. And also, I know this is weird. Did your mother-in-law ever work at the White House?
No, but my husband and I visited there.
You visited there, okay.
So who was buried in a red dress? Stop it.
My mother was in a fuchsia dress and she was viewed.
Call me crazy, maybe I'm colorblind, but fuchsia is not a color I would consider to be red. Having had a reading performed by psychic Maureen Flynn, this gentleman believed it was a good reading and that she was fairly accurate. The tape recording and transcript of the reading showing a different reality.
Mr. Beale, you're a satisfied client of Maureen's, I understand. Is that correct?
Yes.
She did a reading for you not too long ago, which I understand you think is a very good reading.
Yes, she did.
A few simple questions, if I may. First of all, how long did the thing last, first of all, the reading?
About half an hour.
About half an hour. How many names, pardon me, did she give you during that period of half an hour? Would you
Probably
say?
half a dozen.
About half a dozen. And did they all hit?
Not everyone.
Liz, Lynn, Mark, Mary, May, Michael, Rob, Ron, Shirley, Sydney, Stanley, Sid, and Steve. That's 37 names, and she also asked you if you could connect with any name beginning with an N or an L, and you could not do so. Now, in the ones that were accepted, and you did accept 9 of the 37 that were given, these were some of the categories: a son, a lodger, a brother, a nephew, an adopted nephew, a grandfather, a fellow worker, a cousin, and the neighbor's dog.
I personally think this misremembering stems from confirmation bias. People have accurate readings because they're focused on the hits, ignoring all the misses and things psychics get wrong. However, while people misremembering details or stretching to make them fit goes a long way to helping psychics, sometimes they will say something so wrong they need a way out. Because if you double down when you're wrong, you look ridiculous.
I lost my boyfriend tragically a few years ago. They never found him. And I've had such a hard time since.
The reason why you didn't find him is because he's in water.
It was September 11th. There was no, he was a fireman, but there was
no, see, I keep seeing him in water. Is there any way he could have drowned in water some way?
They never found a piece of him. Nothing.
Well, if they were trying to put the fire out.
This way out often comes in the form of simply saying someone behind you or someone in the same row, just anyone else in the room really.
Did anybody have either a brain tumor, brain aneurysm, or a cerebral hemorrhage? Not connected to him, not connected to you. Somebody behind you.
Not to pick on Teresa Caputo too much, but she does have my favourite way of bailing on a conversation in which she'll say she's piggybacking, never returning to the person she was initially reading for. To which I get the mental image of a spirit barging into the room like the bloody Koolaid man and absconding with the conversation.
This does not mean that this is not for you. I'm just piggybacking. I just go with the stronger energy that's going to communicate.
I am the Box Ghost! Who are you?
So if all of this is just tricks, what's the harm? Aren't they just giving people closure? While I wouldn't call breaking down on TV for the entertainment of others closure, there is absolutely no need to see a psychic or medium for closure, as you could see a grief counsellor and they would probably charge you less. I'm not going to point out anyone specifically here, but I have seen some pretty high prices for readings ranging from a few $100s all the way up to $1,000. Expenses aside, the real harm comes from promoting psychics and mediums as real or having genuine supernatural abilities, exposing people to more dangerous ideas. I'm doing my best to avoid the slippery slope fallacy, but scams like psychic surgery do exist. For those of you unfamiliar, psychic surgery is a form of medical fraud in which a psychic surgeon will seemingly reach into a person's body and pull out anything from bad energy to tumors. This of course being nothing more than a sleight of hand trick, the victims of which often returning home to pass away from the illness they were supposedly cured of. While it is true most psychics and mediums don't promote psychic surgery as something that is real, in fact most of them never talk about it, and if they did, I'm I'm sure they would call it out as the horrible scam that it is, psychic surgery is of course an extreme example of what a belief in psychics can lead to. A frighteningly more common example of the harm believing in psychics and mediums can cause comes from their involvement in missing persons cases and criminal investigations. At the start of this video, I played a clip of journalist Lisa Guerrero absolutely demolishing alleged psychic detective Laurie McQuarrie, the result of a journalistic sting operation in which an Inside Edition producer approached Laurie McQuarrie claiming to be the brother of a missing child. McQuarrie agreed to take the case for $400 and had this to say after being presented with a childhood photo of Lisa Guerrero.
I don't believe she's alive. I'm sorry, I believe that it was a violent passing. I think she was hit in the head with a rock. I think she can be brought home.
This all ending with Laurie McQuarrie storming off once she knew she'd been busted. While I'm not really a fan of Inside Edition, I do love this clip as I feel it shows just how willing some psychics are to lie to your face for money. Laurie McQuarrie is not the only psychic to get busted in a sting operation by a news crew. Psychic Deborah Dominique was exposed in a similar manner after being presented with a picture of a boy she was told was missing. Dominique said, among other things, that he was not alive anymore, in Europe, by water, and wearing white.
They're saying he's not alive anymore. He's wearing white, and he's in heaven. I see him by water.
You see him by water?
I wish I could give you better news.
He was in fact alive, wearing black, and sitting right behind her. When confronted, Dominique had some interesting things to say.
How could you say he's deceased?
That's what I was feeling.
You said he may have been in Europe. You said he was taken. Weren't those just a bunch of lies?
No. At the time, they weren't.
But he's right here, and you said he was dead.
Well, it seemed that way. I really have to go now.
Deborah, you say you're a psychic.
Yes.
You didn't see this coming?
I wasn't really planning on this.
Weren't those a bunch of lies? No, at the time they weren't. I'm sorry, yes, they were. When psychics get busted, they often say some quite frankly very funny things in trying to defend themselves. Nella Jones made the interesting claim that in touching an object, she would be able to, through psychic means, tell you the object's history. When having her abilities put to the test by James Randi, she of course failed miserably, which is interesting as one of those objects she was given was an actual murder weapon. I have no idea how Randi was able to get his hands on that. But in response to her failure, she had this to say.
You examined 6 objects, you got no information from 3 of them, and you got incorrect information from the remaining 3. I wonder what the police would make of that.
I'm just trying to explain all that I do by logic.
Oh, no.
What I do is illogical.
You win! Man, I want to get that printed on a t-shirt. Yes, what you do is illogical. You claim to have supernatural abilities. While it is funny watching psychics and mediums fail in sting operations and when they try to prove their abilities are real, it's important to remember they actually either involve themselves in real missing persons cases or are sought out by family members of people who are missing. When this happens, psychics and mediums can do some serious damage. In November of 2004, Luana Miller, the mother of Amanda Berry, who had gone missing in April of 2003, appeared on the Montel Williams show, hoping to get answers from Sylvia Brown, who had this to say.
I don't think I'll ever see her again. Yeah, in heaven on the other side. I just hate that she's not alive, honey.
This must have been devastating for her to hear, and sadly Luana Miller passed away in March of 2006, never really knowing what happened to her daughter. On the 6th of May 2013, Sylvia Brown would be proven wrong when Amanda Berry, along with Michelle Knight and Gina De Jesus, were rescued from the home of Ariel Castro.
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
I'm not going to go into detail as to what these women were forced to suffer through, but I do want to point out that while being held captive, Amanda Berry saw her mother appear on the Montel Williams show.
I would watch her every time she was on Montel, and I'd say, I wish my mom would go on there. And then she could tell my mom that I was alive and that I'm okay. I just broke down crying because I couldn't believe she said that.
While this situation is absolutely horrible, if you want some sort of silver lining, the Charles Ramsey interview can potentially serve as that.
Bro, I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Something is wrong here. Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway.
Charles, thank you very much.
Dead giveaway.
Thank you very much for your time. And
either she homeless or she got problems. That's the only reason why she run to a black man.
Charles, thank
Years later, Amanda Berry and Charles Ramsey would discuss this interview as it had been turned into a viral song by Shmo Yoho. This is of course not the only time Sylvia Browne was wrong. In 2003, she told missing boy Sean Hornbeck's parents that he was dead, only for him to be found alive in 2007. His kidnapper not being Hispanic or having dreadlocks as Sylvia had described him. And this is important, as while Montel Williams issued an apology to Amanda Berry for the 2004 broadcast saying, "I'm sorry that anything said on my show caused her pain," Sylvia Browne's official statement to the Huffington Post was much more defensive. While she did wish the victims a peaceful recovery, she also said, "I have been more right than wrong. If ever there was a time to be grateful and relieved for being mistaken, this is that time. Only God is right all the time." I wasn't going to bring this point up as I don't consider myself to be a religious person, and I kind of just want to do this on facts and reasoning, but we're here so we may as well talk about it. You can straight up ignore any psychic medium who claims to be Christian, Catholic, or talks about the biblical heaven, God, and angels, as these are two ideas that do not play well with each other. Do not turn to mediums or necromancers, do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19 verse 31. And he burned his son as an offering and used fortune-telling and omens and dealt with mediums and with necromancers. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. 2 Kings 21 verse 6. Leviticus verse 20-27 is incredibly harsh on the idea to the point where I don't think I can even say this on YouTube. There are other examples, but whether you believe in God and the Bible or not is irrelevant here. The point is, this is a clear contradiction in the position of psychics and mediums who claim to be Christian or Catholic and yet claim to be able to contact spirits, meaning you should not believe them. But you shouldn't just take that from me, as like I said, I don't consider myself to be a religious person, so here's a priest.
Consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, tarot cards, clairvoyants, mediums, Ouija boards, all of those things, it specifically warns not to become involved in those.
Religious things aside, when it comes to any sort of criminal investigation or missing persons case, since a psychic or medium's abilities don't provide specific details and don't work 100% of the time, their abilities are as worthless as the parental advisory sticker on Cannibal Corpse's album Butchered at Birth. That is to say, they can only serve to provide false hope or take hope away from the families of missing people, wasting police resources and time with tips that go nowhere. I want you to think about this rationally for a second. If you or I or anyone were to contact local law enforcement and say, "Hey, I'm a psychic, you know that missing person you're looking for? They're locked up in the basement at this address, or they're in this state forest at these coordinates." If law enforcement were then to go to the location you provided and find the missing person, alive or deceased, do you think they would A, say, "Wow, that psychic sure was right," or B, haul you in and lock you up as suspect number one? Psychics and mediums can only say things that are vague, that might turn out to be true. They're in water or they're by a body of water. According to the Bureau of Reclamation, around 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. They're in the woods or surrounded by trees. Depending on sources, 33 to 36% of the United States is forested, and depending on the state, that percentage can fluctuate, again doing nothing more than taking advantage of a statistical likelihood. While I've focused on psychics being contacted by the families of missing people, psychics have been known to harass the families of missing people, dozens of them making all sorts of grand promises, trying to make their name off a family's biggest tragedy.
The Houston parents say they became inundated with calls from so-called psychic detectives. They say some even showed up at their front door, promising their psychic visions could help bring Allie home.
Over the years, many psychics have claimed they have either solved cases or worked with law enforcement, and while it is true individual law enforcement officers might reach out to a psychic if they happen to believe in this stuff, law enforcement agencies typically try and distance themselves from these practices.
We don't seek psychics, and we don't utilize any psychics for any of our investigations.
Has a psychic ever helped the FBI solve a missing persons case?
The FBI is unaware of any case that has been resolved from information derived from a psychic.
Police told us there is no recorded instance of psychics solving a criminal case or providing evidence or information which led directly to its solution.
We don't ever call in psychics to help out with cases. We never have, and I don't think that's a practice that we're ever going to start.
However, there was a time where agencies were willing to entertain the idea of psychic detectives, giving psychics more than 20 years to prove they had genuine supernatural abilities under laboratory conditions. In the early 1970s, the American government began conducting a series of experiments investigating psychic phenomenon with a large focus on remote viewing, which according to this declassified document was defined as the acquisition and description by mental means of information blocked from ordinary perception by distance, shield, or time. When a psychic or medium tries to find a missing person, this is essentially what they're trying to do. These experiments went by many names, one of the first being Scan8, which received funding from the CIA in 1970 and began remote viewing research in 1972. The Army Intelligence Program Gondola Wish began in 1977 and was later renamed Grill Flame. Other names include Senelane and Sunstreak, which were successors to Grill Flame. In 1991, all of this research would be consolidated and given one final name: the Stargate Project. In 1995, control of Project Stargate was transferred from the Defense Intelligence Agency to the CIA, and this would be the end of Project Stargate. Commissioned by the CIA in 1995, the American Institutes for Research put together a report titled An Evaluation of Remote Viewing, Research and Applications. This report analysing the experiments that have been conducted, reaching some interesting conclusions, stating among other things, a statistically significant laboratory effort has been demonstrated in the sense that hits occur more often than chance. Evidence has not been provided that clearly demonstrates that the cause of hits are due to the operation of paranormal phenomena. The laboratory experiments have not identified the origins or nature of the remote viewing phenomenon, if indeed it exists at all. The end users indicating that although some accuracy was observed with regard to broad background characteristics, the remote viewing reports failed to produce the concrete specific information valued in intelligence gathering. The information provided was inconsistent, inaccurate with regard to specifics, and required substantial subjective interpretation. And finally, the information provided by remote viewing is vague and ambiguous, making it difficult, if not impossible, for the technique to yield information of sufficient quality and accuracy for actionable intelligence. Thus, we conclude that continued use of remote viewing in intelligence gathering operations is not warranted. I want to talk about this statement here. People have referred to Project Stargate as proof that the US government investigated psychic phenomenon and proved them to be real. But let's take a look at one of these experiments and see just how much subjective interpretation it took to make this work. When we last saw psychic Uri Geller, he was breaking up a fight between Criss Angel and Jim Callahan. But in August of 1973, he was having his abilities put to the test at the Stanford Research Institute. This series of experiments, which were conducted over 8 days, concluding that as a result of Geller's success in this experimental period, we consider that he has demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner. Convincing and unambiguous, keep that in mind. On the first day of testing, after Geller entered an isolated room which was referred to as being shielded, a word was selected at random and an image was drawn, the word being fuse and the image a firecracker. Geller was then notified by intercom that the image had been drawn and was asked to identify what the image was. He said that he saw a cylinder with noise coming out of it, and while you could argue a firecracker is a cylinder that produces noise, Geller drew a drum and believed that's what it was. He also drew a snake, a pen, and what appears to be Humpty Dumpty flipping off a giraffe. Convincing and unambiguous. In the second test, the word was bunch, the image being a bunch of grapes. After talking about how he saw drops of water coming out of the picture and purple circles, Uri Geller drew a picture of grapes matching the target. On day 2, the first target was a picture of the devil with a trident or pitchfork, to which Geller produced several images, the first showing the 10 Commandments, the word God written on stone tablets, along with several random things. The second image showed an apple with a worm coming out of it, more stone tablets with the world, and other random things, one of which is reportedly a snake. The third image produced again showed the world with stone tablets and a trident-shaped object. It was accepted that he had drawn the trident, however it was speculated his inability to draw the devil was culturally induced. The second target for the day was a representation of the solar system drawn without orbit lines. Geller said it was something to do with space and produced this image. Days 3 and 4 didn't produce any hits. The images are not included in the report, however it's written that Geller's first target was a rabbit. Geller said that he got no clear impression and passed, having drawn nothing that in any way resembled a rabbit. His next 2 targets were a tree and an envelope, where it stated he experienced difficulty, did not make a drawing that corresponded to either drawing, and again passed. Forcing me to bring up this rather amusing statement. In these experiments conducted with this shielded room, 6 days work was done. Good results were obtained on the 4 days when there was no openly skeptical observer. It kinda tells you all you really need to know, but calling the results good is a stretch. The target was a camel. Geller felt unsure and passed, but his first choice drawing was a horse. The target was a bridge, more specifically the Golden Gate Bridge. Geller drew some lines with some squares underneath and said he didn't know what it was and passed. The target was a flying seagull. He said he saw a swan flying over a hill and drew some birds. This was close enough to be called correct, and yeah, like the grapes, I'll give him this one. The target was a kite that had been drawn on a computer. This was the first image he produced. He then drew some triangular airplanes and then passed. The target was a picture of a church stored on a computer. He produced these two images. In the report, it actually states, "It is clear that both of his attempts have some elements in common with the target drawing, but he had no idea it was a church and passed. I'm sorry, but I just don't see it." The target was a heart with an arrow through it. Uri Geller produced these two images, which were considered similar to the target as both showed an arrow. Aside from having his abilities either debunked or replicated by magicians many times, these experiments I feel in no way show that Uri Geller has paranormal perceptual abilities, and certainly not in a convincing and unambiguous manner. In a separate document titled A Suggested Remote Viewing Training Procedure dated December 1986, a novice-level remote viewer produced this image when trying to identify a target location along with a description. Can you guess what this is? Well, the target was actually Grant's tomb, New York City. This document noting the similarities between the image and description produced and the target location, while also acknowledging how vague it was. I'm not accusing any of the researchers or participants involved in these experiments of fabricating results or acting in bad faith. However, I think it's clear they were reaching, using a substantial amount of subjective interpretation to make remote viewing seem real. In doing so, making it seem like hits occur more often than chance. And the reason for this is very simple. This was Cold War America, and all of this research began when footage emerged from the Soviet Union of a Russian woman seemingly moving objects across a table with her mind. The CIA believing that the Soviet Union was spending millions of dollars a year on research they called psychotronics, and if they were to have psychic spies, America would need them too. The US government being sent on a wild goose chase that lasted more than 20 years by nothing more than simple magic tricks. Now, some of you might be thinking I'm just a sad, hateful little man for going after psychics and mediums in the way that I have. I'm sure there will be comments from people who believe in psychics and mediums telling me that I'm wrong, that I'm stupid, that in spite of all the research I've done, that I don't know anything. And that's okay, because I understand why. As a cognitive bias, the backfire effect causes people who encounter evidence that challenges their beliefs to reject that evidence and to strengthen their support of their original stance. This response being more emotional rather than rational, it's why convincing a flat earther they're wrong is almost impossible. Short of launching them into space, you really don't have a chance. And I get it, having your beliefs challenged can be confronting and scary. But I want to make it abundantly clear, I don't dislike psychics and mediums as people. A lot of them are quite charismatic, and this without a doubt helps them with what they do. I also don't dislike people who believe in psychics and mediums. I don't think they're ignorant or stupid. I think they've been deceived by a trick. However, it's what psychics, mediums, and the people who believe in them do that I don't agree with, and that is participate in a billion-dollar industry that takes advantage of grieving and desperate people, selling them a lie. In saying that, I'm not the only person who will warn you about psychics and mediums. YouTuber Super Eyepatch Wolf has a great video on the subject. I would highly encourage you to check it out. A link to that will be in the description. But I don't just mean other people who are skeptical. While researching for this video, I stumbled into a weird rabbit hole of psychics, mediums, and people who claim to have supernatural abilities, warning people about scammers and explaining how to spot a fake psychic, something I found to be truly ironic.
So in this video, I want to share with you 4 pointers that will really help you to understand the difference between the real psychics and cons that only prey on your vulnerability and fear.
How to spot a fraud. What are the signs of a psychic that's just trying to take you to the cleaners?
Hi, we're the Psychic Twins. I'm Terry. And I'm Linda. And today we're going to talk about how to spot a fake psychic.
As I watched these videos, I began to notice they were bringing up a lot of the same points, and leaving some of the more subjective things aside, like if a psychic or medium doesn't pass the vibe check, there were 2 points that came up more than anything else, the first being curse removal.
If you go to a card reader and they are feeding you a bunch of fears, telling you there's bad taboo on you, some kind of negative stuff it's really scaring you, making you feel uncomfortable, and then they tell you for an additional fee, they could remove it, do some kind of ritual, or try and get more money out of you for something else. Just stop right there.
The second way you can tell if a psychic is a scammer is if they tell you that you have a hex or bad luck or somebody put a curse on you or whatever, blah 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 blah, and they can remove it for $300 or $500 or $1,000.
While I personally believe all of this is a scam, as psychics and mediums are charging for a service they can't actually provide as none of them can speak to the dead, curse, hex, bad energy removal, whatever you want to call it, is the #1 scam that I have seen used by con artists to rob people of their life savings time and time again.
The fortune teller claimed evil spirits were coming after her and her children, and eventually, the psychic convinced this grieving widow to pay her more than $125,000 to protect her family.
According to the complaint, Evans told one of the victims death was stalking them and their cancer would come back if they didn't pay her. Right now, the self-proclaimed psychic is not in custody but is due in court this December.
Detectives say Wilson is quite the manipulator and somehow convinced the veteran to stop taking his PTSD medication and to keep their sessions secret. According to an affidavit, Wilson promised to bring the man out of the darkness. That vet paid Wilson $92,000 over the course of 15 months before he realized something wasn't right.
In a stunning lack of self-awareness, the second most common point I saw brought up by psychics and mediums was that if a psychic or medium is asking a lot of questions, making general statements that could apply to anyone and not being specific about things, you shouldn't believe them.
Number 3, they speak in extremely general terms. Who's Mike? Who's John? Why do they ask that? Because everyone knows somebody named Mike or John. So they're gonna speak in very general terms, make total blanket statements that just don't apply to you or resonate with you at all. Or maybe they do because they're so general.
If they start asking you a bunch of questions, or they start saying stuff that's really general, they don't get specific on anything, that's how you can tell that they may not be legit.
Saying generalities, making general questions, or making you do the majority of the talking is always bad. So you just want to get someone who's focused on the details, the information, and they're not going to ask anything from you.
We've talked about a lot of things, but if you were to take this and apply it as a rule to any psychic, medium, clairvoyant, tarot card reader, fortune teller, you would not believe in any of their abilities, because when you strip away the mysticism and woo-woo nonsense, at the end of the day, they all say and do the exact same things as each other.
Who understands the month of March or the 3rd of a month?
Month of May or the 5th of a month is connected as well.
Because he's laboring my breathing.
And he's laboring my breathing. Do you have somebody, family, that is a J or an M?
There's a J name, like JM. I'm getting JM.
So there's a significance around January, like a birth date and a death date in January.
Something special in April, and what that is, whether it's an anniversary or birthday or something like that.
There's an MAR name like Mark, Mary.
And who is the MR name? Mark, Mary, Marie?
Does that make sense to you?
Can you understand that?
Do you understand that?
How do you understand that?
Who is Andy or Anthony?
Who's Kaylee or Kelly?
Who's Joseph? Or J.O. like John?
Who had the issue with the legs?
Who has trouble with the legs?
I want to say Charlie. Charles.
I feel like it's either Charles or Charlie or there's something like that he wants me to say.
Are you adding on to your home or redoing something around your home?
Did you just start remodeling your house, or are you changing like the inside? Do you understand?
Do you understand?
Does that make sense to anyone?
Is there a middle name like this, a J or G?
They tell me to talk about the J or G name like Jack or James.
Where does the H name come in? Helen, Hank, Harry, someone's last name, or a state they don't have to be passed, they could be here in the physical world?
I'm trying to discern their name, but it's Mari or Mary or Marie.
Did she have a blow to the front of her head?
Did he have a head injury that happens?
J with an N in it?
Yes.
Like Jean or Joan?
Do you know of any JA names in the family?
There's a C or K name that they want me to bring up.
I'm seeing somebody who's an M or J initial. Do you have somebody, family, who's either living or deceased that's M or J?
So if you're going to call one of them fake, in my opinion, and with the evidence I've presented, I believe you have to call all of them fake. Proving one final point, in the montage you just watched, one of the people wasn't even a psychic or medium. They were in fact mentalist and illusionist Darren Brown, a person who does not claim to have any sort of supernatural abilities and has in fact gone out of his way to call out claims of the supernatural. I began this video with a quote by Penn Jillette in which he essentially says the simplest of tricks can fool the smartest of people. While the tricks of mediums and psychics aren't necessarily simple, they are still just that, tricks. I really hope I was able to change some people's opinions on psychics and mediums, or at least have people question the idea, and yeah, I know because of things like confirmation bias and the backfire effect, the chances are slim. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. And I'm sure I'll look back on this video, even with all the work I've put in, and think I could have said something better, or I could have explained something better to maybe convince more people. I could have shown more examples of just how morbid things can get, like psychic twins Terry and Linda Jameson claiming to channel the spirit of John Benet Ramsey. I could have shown more examples of just how wildly disrespectful some psychics can be when talking about people's past loved ones. I could have shown more examples of just how delusional some psychics can be when having their abilities put to the test and failing.
I didn't feel like the cards really helped because there was no interaction with the readings.
So this doesn't make you think twice as to whether or not you're psychic?
No, I still believe I'm psychic.
But the reality is, there has always been and will always be people who claim to have supernatural abilities. There will always be people who believe them, and in my opinion, there always needs to be people willing to challenge these ideas for the sake of those who can't see through the tricks. And with that, I think I have said all I want to say about how psychics and mediums fool us.
I'm your Nicktoon astrologer, Squidward, reminding you that psychics will tell you good things if you tip them well.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Links to all my sources are in the description. I don't think I missed any, but there were a lot. I would highly encourage you to check out the works of Antoine Coeur de Jablin and the Count of Malay, as it's very funny when you know that they didn't understand Egyptian hieroglyphs. When reading through it, I kept being reminded of the Metal Gear Rising meme.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
I want to give a massive shout out to my incredibly patient top patrons, JBalls902 and Joseph. I know I've never been one for a posting schedule, but a year since my last long form video is a bit ridiculous. I gotta at least be more consistent than JonTron, so I want to apologize for that. And again, say thank you for your continued support and patience. You guys are the best. Also, in the description, you'll find links to several other channels. Rachel Oates, I feel, had some really good takes, so I'll link 3 ways psychics cause harm. Holy Koolaid, this is basically all he does is call out psychics, faith healers, stuff like that, so I'll leave a link to his channel. Again, if you haven't seen Super Eyepatch Wolf's video on psychics, I can't recommend it enough. I guess you could say it was my inspiration for making this video, but I have been Seda. Tune in next time when we talk about Medusa. Should Perseus have slayed her for selling statues and making a living? Girl's gotta get that drachma.